Hello, welcome back to the NOTCAST, episode 282. It is the Easter Monday, so happy Zombie Jesus Day, 10th of April 2023. And today I am talking about the Smiths. I am talking about their second album, but not really their second album, more like their 1.5 album, released on the 12th of November 1984. That album is Hatful of Hollow. And I'm going to talk about that and the singles and all the stuff that happened at the time around about then in a way that hopefully makes some kind of sense. I think as I started off talking about the Smiths previously, is inevitably that does mean I'm going to have to talk about solo Morrissey, and I have opinions about that, but not as many opinions as solo Morrissey has, a man never short of ideas. The Hatful of Hollow album was a compilation of a number of things. It was a singles A's and B's release. It was a radio sessions album. It was a way of recasting the first Smith studio records, because I mean, alternatively, you can almost every song from the Smiths debut album is on Hatful of Hollow in a radio session version, and I think the band felt that the radio session versions of the songs were better and livelier and more accurate and more accurately represented who the Smiths actually were. Also, by the way, the first studio recordings of a lot of Smith songs came from these Peel sessions and these BBC sessions and these Kid Jensen sessions and all that type of stuff that were recorded in 1983. So with the release of the debut album on the 20th of February 1984, a staggering 39 years ago, and the release of the Sandy Shaw joint single Hand in Glove on the 30th of March, the Smiths then moved into touring mode, touring their debut album, playing a lot of UK shows as well as some European shows for the first time. So Amsterdam, Breeze, Zurich, Frankfurt, Vienna, Cologne. I think Bremen was cancelled as well for some reason. The start of a long-standing tradition. If you're a Morrissey fan or a Smiths fan, you can't have gone through at least some cancellations. I think I'm on about 4 now. And now I just preemptively don't buy tickets to see Morrissey live on the grounds that it might get cancelled anyway. So we have the sessions for Hatful of Hollow came in 2 parts. Really, there were the radio sessions that were recorded for the BBC in July, September, and I think maybe August 1983. That were the songs from the debut album that appear on Hatful of Hollow. There was also a second set of sessions that started in January 1984 at a place called, I think it was the Matrix, and then also somewhere called the Fallout Shelter, which was owned by Island Records. And the first one of those recordings was made, or was released, on the 27th of April 1984. It was the single Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now. If you had to get a computer to come up with what would be a typical Smiths song title or a typical Smiths song lyric, it would almost definitely be Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now. Here is the 12-inch, here is the 7-inch, and I think also here is, by the way, the 1988 Rough Trade CD single of Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now. Apparently, I think some of these CD singles, because I think Rough Trade went out of business in, I think, 1989, some of these CD singles are worth a lot of money. I haven't looked up how much this one is worth. If I looked up how much my CD single of Heaven Knows I'm Miserable is now, is worth, or for that matter, how much my CD single of William It Was Really Nothing was worth, I'd probably go, fuck it, sell it. But all these records, and this is why I talk about all of the records, is they're all part of my history, they're part of my story, they're part of my life and my journey onto being who I am today. Heaven help us, indeed, if that is the case. But no, Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now. If you were going to feed all the Smiths lyrics into an AI generator and come out with a Smiths AI generated song, it would almost definitely be called Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now. It would almost definitely have Viv Nicholson on the front, and it would almost definitely have the line, I was looking for a job and then I found a job and Heaven knows I'm miserable now, alongside the next one, which is, in my life, why do I give valuable time to people who don't care if I live or die? It is, I think it's fair to say, probably one of the most typical and most easily parodied of the Smiths songs, Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now. But it is, I think, a really good one, actually, because it's got that combination of joy and melancholy that makes the Smiths the Smiths. And that nobody else really did quite the way that they did. Now, the 7 inches back with Suffer Little Children. Suffer Little Children is a controversial Smith song, as I mentioned in my previous episode, primarily because it's regarded as being, although it clearly addresses the spectre of the Moors murderers and Myra Hindley. And you could also look at the picture of Viv Nicholson on the front of the single sleeve. Were you a moron in a hurry, to quote British copyright law, you could look at that and think that was Myra Hindley, where actually it isn't. It's Viv Nicholson, who won, I think, some lottery or football pool winners millions. And when she said what she was going to do, someone said, "What are you going to do?" She said, "I'm going to spend, spend, spend." And this is her returning to her childhood home in Salford, I believe, when after winning the money and looking back upon what she had left behind. Not long after, she completely ran out of money, spent all the lot, and was then, back where she started. But this is her returning to her old home after the death of her first husband. So it's like a lot of Smiths covers, and you'll see this when you look through all the Smiths iconography and all the Smiths imagery on the Smiths album, on the album and single sleeves, is around normally about one dominant figure in a position that seems incongruous with everything that's happening with it. You can also think about, for example, the cover to William, I Am Really Nothing, or perhaps also the reissue of William, I Am Really Nothing. Again, that's a fairly dominant figure, although perhaps two dominant figures if you want to think about it from a slightly vulgar way. Some girls are bigger than others. Sorry, I had no idea I was going to get vulgar there, so I should stop now before I dig myself any further into the grave. So this is the Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now single, and it was released on the 27th of April 1984, backed with Suffer Little Children, and also on the 12-inch Girl Afraid, which in its studio recording, I think, is on Hatful of Hollow. I'm not sure if the radio session version of it. Now, I'm going to show you a rarity from the Smiths' body of work here. This is the first press run of Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now. And what that means, and you can do this by looking at the matrix number on the record, because actually I listened to this a couple of years ago during lockdown. I listened to all of the Smiths' work on my record player out in the garden with the sun shining, reading a book during the summer, and I was like, that's longer than I remember it being. And I hadn't really realised is the first print run of the 12-inch, not that many, have an exclusive alternative mix of Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now that has a second chorus at the end. So it repeats the song, and it runs for, I think, 3 minutes 50 seconds, although the label tells me it's 3 minutes 34 on here. And you can tell by looking at the catalogue number. This one is RTT 156A1. Some copies of this go for about £100 in mint condition. This, of course, isn't mint condition because this is a copy I've owned for over 30 years. However, this mix of the track I don't think has been officially re-released anywhere. If you want to get it, you have to track down one of the original first run 12 inches, which are not cheap at all, I'm afraid to say. The only reason I noticed really is because I looked at it and thought, I was listening to it going, I thought, that's longer than I remember. And then I Googled it. So Google to the rescue. But there we are. And it is, of course, backed on the 12-inch with Girl Afraid and with Suffer Little Children. And Suffer Little Children, I believe, has the lyric around Take Me to the Moors, etc., which was seen as, in some way, glamorising or romanticising the Moors murderers by Myra Hindley and what's his name, Ian something or other. So there we are. This is the CD version that came out in according to this, 1988, I believe. Now, controversy. I should remember how to speak English, shouldn't I, really? The controversy around Suffer Little Children is mentioned in this book, Pete Pollism, and mentions that it was a child sex song that put the Beeb in a spin, apparently. So there was a radio session that was recorded in September 1983, and it was not included in that, I believe. And then there's another one. You can tell by the The fonts, by the way, that is the sun. I still think they use that font, actually. That might be the sun too, or it might be the mirror. It says Moore's murderer, mum slams sick song. And what we did have is the original design for the sleeve, by the way, features a still of Albert Finney from Saturday Night, Sunday Morning. And if you think about it, there's a number of songs around this time, Distant Voices, Still Live, Saturday Night, Sunday Morning. Gritty black and white films about life as an urban kind of working class human in pretty miserable England in the 60s. That's the original plan cover, by the way, for Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now there. And it was one of those films where you watch it and you feel like you've been punched in the face, actually, much like Darren Aronofsky films, Pi, Requiem for a Dream, The Whale, for example. Tough movies which don't have a huge amount of light in them at all, I'm afraid to say. And Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now was the first single that was released. The band went on tour. They played a second round of European shows to promote the song and the upcoming album, as well as the Smiths' debut record, and played shows in, and I've quickly written this down, Hamburg, Paris, and their one-off show at the Finland, I think on the 1st of June. Hamburg was broadcast on television and was released as a bootleg DVD. So this is the Smiths live in Hamburg. And the Smiths live in Hamburg is on YouTube. Broadcast on Rock Palace. I remember it was very, very rarely shown on British television. I didn't even know that it had been broadcast until I remember about 1991, 1992. ITV, or in the UK, started broadcasting all through the night, and they started showing obscure old rock concerts that they thought nobody would be interested in because they were probably cheap as chips to broadcast, including the Smiths in Hamburg. I set up my timer to record it, and I had the Smiths in Hamburg on VHS. I wasn't going to stay up until 3:30 in the morning to watch it because I'm a wimp, and I think I had to go to work or go to university the next morning. But now, thanks to the glory of YouTube, the Smiths live in Hamburg can now be watched any time, as opposed to when people had their hands around the throat of media and you could only really go and hear old concerts by going into tape trading or buying or recording or taping VHSs of people through mail ordering at record fairs. It was a weird time. It really, really was. The idea of being able to go to YouTube and just type Smiths Hamburg 1984 and to get it in 720 DPI, which is pretty much double the resolution of VHS, and being able to access it within 3 minutes of thinking of it is but then that's just how things were. There was a very tightly there was a gatekeeper around access, and the only way that you got to hear about the Smiths was you either had to buy the record or you had to hear them on the radio or see them on television. And the only way you had to learn about the Smiths was to read about them in the music papers or to get somebody who had a tape, or if John Peel played a broadcast of it. So there wasn't just an idea of an artist could start off somewhere and someone could go, listen to this, and then they'd send you a link or you'd see something on Facebook. There wasn't Facebook, there wasn't Twitter, there wasn't YouTube. I'm well aware this makes me sound now like I am Grandpa Simpson, moaning about everything, but I genuinely, actually I am, aren't I? I used to be with it, and then they changed what it was, and now what it is weird and scary. Yeah, and it'll happen to you. There you are. That's your obligatory Simpsons reference there. Since The Simpsons is no doubt out of date and uncool anyway. We had on the release of the 24th of August 1984, we had the second single released from the album. Another Smiths original. This time, William, It Was Really Nothing. I think 2 minutes and 9 seconds, or maybe 2 minutes 19 seconds of absolute glory. Now, this is one of the finest of the Smiths singles. Let's quickly check and see the running time on here. 2 minutes 10 seconds actually. This is the original 7-inch release, and the cover for this, by the way, is a photograph from an advert for ASD speakers that ran in national newspapers between 1980 and 1982. So we have obviously this desolate man with a huge loudspeaker lying next to him on the bed. It was an unusual cover, I think it's fair to say, and I'm not sure they fully got permission for it, actually, because it was withdrawn in October 1985 following a claim for violation of privacy and deceptive trade practices, when it became apparent that the culprit was Rough Trade rather than Warner Brothers, and the company from which it had been licensed didn't realise the commercial reason that it was going to be used. So there we have it. So reissues of William It Was Really Nothing had to come in a different sleeve, and there are in fact 2 different sleeves, 3 sleeves in total for William It Was Really Nothing. This is the second sleeve for the reissue of it. It still bears the same catalogue number, but this time in the UK a different B-side. So William It Was Really Nothing was backed with Please 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 Let Me Get What I Want, which if you haven't heard it and you've seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off, you have heard it. You've heard the instrumental version recorded by Dream Academy and produced by David Gilmour of the Pink Floyds. If you haven't got that version, then you have this 7-inch, which is the reissue version with a slightly different cover. This is Billie Whitelaw as Lottie, taken from a film called Charlie Bubbles, released in 1968, which won a British Film Academy Award for her performance. And this is backed with a song called How Soon Is Now. How Soon Is Now was wasted as a B-side, and it got a single release of its own, which followed up shortly. So Johnny Marr was writing songs, and he wrote a song called Swamp, which became How Soon Is Now, put down the demo, recorded it, played the tape. William It Was Really Nothing, How Soon Is Now, Please 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 Let Me Get What I Want. And Jeff Travis, I think Rough Trade owner, wasn't that impressed with How Soon Is Now, and it went on to the 12-inch as a B-side, and later as on the 7-inch B-side of the reissue here from 1985 onwards, which is a tragic waste of a song as good as How Soon Is Now. But never one to let a song go to waste. How Soon Is Now later became 2 separate single releases. So it was released in 1985. It appeared on the Smiths' then 3rd LP, Meet His Murder, and it also got a single release in 1992 to go with the release of the Smiths' Best Of. And How Soon Is Now is, I think it's an incredible song, but it's completely different from William It Was Really Nothing. So here, William It Was Really Nothing on the 12-inch, by the way. So this is the 1985 edition of William It Was Really Nothing. Again, featuring How Soon Is Now on the B-side and Please 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 Let Me Get What I Want. This is a marvellous, one of the finest 12-inch singles of all time, actually. It's short, it's sweet, it's over in a flash of light, and it even comes with its own Rough Trade inner sleeve that's got the Rough Trade catalogue number on there. A true sign of attention to detail and care. And so when you have things like this, and this is something that I think is really kind of not necessarily really appreciated these days, is, you know, when you were buying a 12-inch single like this, you weren't just buying, you know, a music delivery system that had 3 songs in. You were delivering a mass-produced work of art, a stylized work of art that features, you know, music and songs, a complete package. Not like 10 years later, when the Shaman would put 8 different remixes of Boss Drum onto a CD single, which could fit into your palm and sold for $2.99. You know, this felt like it was a major artistic statement, and given the prominence of someone's chest on the cover, certainly tied in with the themes that we have from William It Was Really Nothing, How Soon Is Now, and Please 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 Let Me Get What I Want. William It Was Really Nothing, I think, was probably kind of influenced by Billy Liar, and it was influenced by the idea of, you know, when you're younger, and I mean, certainly I first heard the Smiths when I was maybe 15 or 16, clumsy and shy. I didn't have experience of relationships. I didn't have experience of much of the outside world. There were somewhat abstract concepts to me. There were things that I knew about, I understood them, but there were things that I hadn't experienced. I hadn't lived those things, so I didn't know necessarily what those things were. And so when William It Was Really Nothing kind of came out, and there was that line about, would you like to marry me, and if you like, you can buy the ring. You know, these are lyrics which address concepts which most songs don't talk about. Most songs about marriage are sung from the perspective of a woman. So we're going to go to the chapel, we're going to go and get married, or maybe Beautiful South, Don't Marry Her. You know, all these type of songs. Later Morris's Will Never Marry. These are songs that are sung by men about marriage, and the idea is that, you know, marriage is portrayed as a female ideal. An idea of a thing that should happen is that, you know, you should get married, and you should you know, grow old and be with a person. And depending upon your ideas of marriage at the time, there were some very old-fashioned views towards marriage, which I think were very outdated. And I think my experience of marriage. The marriage that I grew up within, my parents' marriage, was asymmetrical. And so the idea being is that I think probably the male in that relationship looked at the woman, my mother, and saw her as, a servant in some respects, the way that he behaved, or somebody who was always going to be there, that he could then do whatever he liked and enabled him to do whatever things he wanted to do throughout the rest of his life, which sadly tied in with the then traditional concepts of marriage. And one of the things that I heard is that my dad overheard my mum saying, "Oh, he's perfect, I wouldn't change him," and that was the thing that made my dad think, "Yep, she's the one for me," as opposed to thinking she's interesting or funny or sexy or intelligent, or brings a lot to offer. It's like, she doesn't want to change me, so that's okay. That's what I want. And the concept of marriage at the time was, I think, far less liberal than it should have been, or far less equal than it could have been. And I have very different opinions about marriage than that generation. So this song was almost a man warning another man around, saying, look, this may not be the thing for you. You may not want to be in this. You don't, it's more equal than you expect, or perhaps you've got some old-fashioned virtues and values, or maybe you've got some more enlightened values, that this isn't the right thing for you at all. So William, It Was Really Nothing, was I think quite an unusual song in terms of how it approached its subject matter. And then How Soon Is Now, which of course is one of the greatest songs about love and desire ever written or performed, on the B-side, alongside Please, Please, Please Let Me Get What I Want. It's almost like a thematic trilogy around various kind of intersections of relationships and marriage and desire and lust and love and everything that goes with it. One of the finest individual 12-inch singles ever released, in fact, I would go so far as to say, for William, It Was Really Nothing. Even better in some people's eyes than Love Will Tear Us Apart or Blue Monday. In the meantime, of course, we had the album that was coming on its way and coming down the track, and was released on the 12th of November 1984. But I have forgotten one small release, the CD single of William, It Was Really Nothing. Again, this was released in 1988. This features a third cover design. This features, and let me get this right, Colin Campbell from the Leather Boys, which was also used on some German editions of the Ask single. I don't quite know why this was used as the cover for the CD single in the UK, but it was. And it was, there again, tying in with some ideas that you had about males, masculinity, and sensitivity and ideas, is that the idealized male, when you also compared to perhaps the idealized pink tinted and somewhat voluptuous Billy Whitelaw there. So I don't think it was entirely coincidental that was the design for the CD single, although of course that was, as I said, used on the German versions of Ask. On the 12th of November, meanwhile, a little while later, came the release of the 1.5 or second Smith Studio Records, Hatful of Hollow. Here it's the original rough trade gatefold edition, and you open the gatefold to have a picture of the Smiths backstage at Glastonbury Festival in 1984. This is one of the finest compilation albums of all time. Here's the original inner sleeve that went with it, and here is the very battered and crackly vinyl, which I listened to yesterday. In fact, when I listened to this yesterday, because my cat, well, I have two cats, but my oldest cat, who you've not seen, is not used to me playing records. Is fascinated by them spinning on the record deck, and somewhat surprisingly started sniffing the record and then started licking it whilst it was turning around. So the cat and I had a frank exchange of views yesterday, which included me calling her an absolute walloper who needed to get her nose out of my records, because it was just daft, that gif there is of the cat with its head underneath the tap going, whilst the water drips around its ears and it's not actually drinking anything. That's sometimes how I feel about my oldest cat, who I love but is daft as a brush. And yeah, that's probably more than I need to tell you about Mog, the cat. Hatful of Hollow is one of the finest albums that there's ever been. In fact, at 16 songs, it's both almost a revision of the first album and a B-sides compilation and a radio sessions release all at the same time. It's really bloody good. Although, of course, I wouldn't be saying that if it wasn't, and I wouldn't be doing these if the records aren't good, or at the very least aren't worthy of my attention. And we have Hatful of Hollow, came out at £3.99 on the week of release. Most albums, I think, were £5.49. This was £3.99. Charted at number 7 in the UK charts. And we'll go through a track by track kind of overview of it, but we'll start off with this. This is on the cover, kind of follows on from the theme that we had from the Smiths debut album. This is a male model, a cocktail model, who was unnamed and unidentified at the time, had a tattoo on his back in the days when only sailors, brawlers and ruffians had tattoos. Obviously everything's changed since you've been to London, the southern wonderland. Everyone's got tattoos these days. And it was not released, by the way. Hatful of Hollow wasn't released as an album in the US until 1993, which means that if you were in the US, this album didn't exist. And these songs, William, It Was Really Nothing, How Soon Is Now, Handsome Devil, these songs were not on a Smiths album, which is pretty bizarre when you think about it. And that's why The World Won't Listen, when it was released in 1987 in America, had a 2-disc edition that had a number of studio tracks that hadn't been on anything else previously. Pretty bizarre, but of course when I get to talking about Louder Than Bombs and World Won't Listen, that's when I'll talk about that. Hatful of Hollow, meanwhile, brilliant record. Obviously it opens with William, It Was Really Nothing, this lovely, very articulate, very almost playful 2 minutes of music that suddenly was in a blink of an eye and you've gone, and it opens with the lyrics, the rain falls down in a humdrum town, this town will drag you down. Now, as somebody who grew up in a humdrum town and felt like he was never going to escape, all of these songs to me spoke to me in a way which I really identified. So even songs that I absolutely loved by other artists like Depeche Mode and New Order and The Cure and that sort of, nobody really talked about what it was like to grow up in tight suburban streets where you've got not very much money. Depeche Mode's debut LP was all about, hey, you're such a pretty boy. New Order were writing songs about feelings as opposed to situations. And The Cure, I don't think, ever really wrote a song that I articulated what it was like to grow up in a small town with no hope and no prospects. And as Morrissey said on the Oxford Roadshow in 1985 about You've Got Everything Now, that when he left school, he felt surrounded by oafish lads at school with big cars and lots of money who had gone on to tremendous success whilst he was waiting for the bus. Now, as a 16-year-old, that's very much how I felt. So I left school at, I did my GCSEs at the age of 16, and lots of kids at my school went off to go and work in the car factory. They were earning £125 a week. They had cars, they had jobs, they had money, they had girlfriends, and I felt like I was somehow being punished for having a brain and intelligence because I stayed on and I did more studying. But I was poor and I had no money and no girlfriend and no car and no success. And, they were kind of racing ahead in things that were very materialistic. But I felt like I was, stood there with my face pressed up against the glass as other people were racing ahead and outranking me. Now, a life that's lived in comparison is one that becomes the thief of joy, as I think Mark Twain said. Is that one way where if you compare yourself to other people, you'll always come up short. If I think about Ed Sheeran, for example, and let's hope we don't, he's younger than me and he's got more money than I will ever earn in the course of my life, and more tattoos, of course, and he's played to bigger venues. But he's Ed Sheeran. And the thing is, as Brian Eno said, is you throw your dart at the wall and then you draw the bullseye around where the dart has landed. And so you try not to compare yourself to other people. You can only really compare yourself to what you could have been and who you could have been and how you could have been and what you could have become. And by that standard, I feel that personally I've achieved an awful lot in my life. Considering where I came from and the prospects that I had when I was growing up, and the cards that I was dealt at that particular point in time, I've achieved staggering things if I rate them by my barometers of success. And of course, everyone's barometer of success is different. If you're my dad, the barometer of success when you were younger was to probably be a bowling superstar. When I was younger, my barometer of success was to be happy and to have a girlfriend. And luckily, I managed to achieve that, and I managed to sustain that over the course of my life on a near constant basis since then. Or boyfriend, actually, come to think of it. I don't discriminate. But comparison is the thief of joy. And Morrissey was looking at people that were his age, that were, had lots of money and cars and houses and girlfriends, and somebody that said, "Would you like to marry me? And if you like, you can buy the ring." Was having all of those things, and he was comparing himself to them. Whereas, obviously, you could argue that Morrissey would probably never have been happy if he'd have followed that particular path and married somebody at the age of 18 and got them pregnant and etc. But of course, we all have our own paths to follow through life. And my word, didn't Morrissey follow his own path to the exclusion of all others? Not necessarily a bad thing, of course. To thine own self be true is the cliche. So we have William, It Was Really Nothing, track 1, side 1, over and done, 2 minutes 10 seconds. And the version that's on here is the single version, the only version that's been released. The record label did take the original tapes and they remixed it to see if they could get a version that they preferred, but that version has not been issued, so that's a rarity for the Inevitable Smiths box sets that are due to come out. Track 2 is What Difference Does It Make? This version is recorded for the Kid Jensen session in July 1983. And this is probably Morrissey's least favourite of the Smiths songs. He said he thought it was awful the day after the record was released, and he didn't like it at all then. And apparently in 2012 said that it was also one of the worst Smiths songs that had been released. So if you like What Differences Does It Make, at least two members of the Smiths, Morrissey and Marr, disagree with you. Track 3 is These Things Take Time, again recorded for the Kid Jensen session, but this time in September 1983. And this was a single B-side, and the single version was released on Louder Than Bombs in 1987. So for a number of years, the only version of These Things Take Time that was available on album was the radio session that's on Hatful of Hollow. And it's one of the most played of the Smiths songs. Undoubtedly a rollicking, rip-roaring rampage of revenge on stage, i.e. a banger. But perhaps one that when you listen to it now 40 years later, it's quite good, but it's not, amazing. And then we have This Charming Man is track 3. This is the Peel session version recorded in September 1983. And the Peel session version, let me just quickly check. Oh, it's not on that one. Has only been released on this LP. It was the first studio recording of This Charming Man, and it's the different and alternate arrangement that feels to me more busky than the single version. Still pretty amazing to think that the single version had actually been deleted for several years until 1992 when it was released as a single for the Best Of album. We then have How Soon Is Now, that fantastic track, last seen on the 12-inch of William, It Was Really Nothing. And this is obviously one of the best Smith songs of all time. It's a classic, it's an epic. You only thought, oh yeah, I've got the hang of the Smiths, I know what they are. It's minor chord indie rock. It's a little bit sad, lyrics are a little bit weird, it's quite conventional, and then all of a sudden How Soon Is Now comes at you from the left field, and it sounds like some kind of weird bastardized funk version of the Smiths, or it's got this really lovely chunky bass line, this guitar arpeggio that repeats itself constantly, a shuffling drum beat. It doesn't sound like anything else, almost as if it created its own genre. Now, there was a version of How Soon Is Now that was recorded for a Peel session in 1984. It is the Peel session version, which was recorded in 1984, is barely different from the studio version. It uses the original drum tracks and the original vocal tracks, and there's only a re-recording of the bass line and some guitar parts to make it different. That's perhaps why the Peel session version of How Soon Is Now has not been released since, because it replicates at least half of the original studio version of the song. There is also on the 12-inch of How Soon Is Now, because How Soon Is Now got a single release just after William, It Was Really Nothing. there is, on the Italian version, somebody picked out the wrong take of How Soon Is Now, and so the Italian 12-inch of How Soon Is Now has a different track on it, has a different mix. It's only available on that Italian pressing. Of course, it's on YouTube, so you don't have to buy it. I don't own it because it was staggeringly expensive and I never found a copy I could afford. But How Soon Is Now is one of the best kind of Smith songs that there is, really. When he talks about, I'm the sun and the air of a shyness that is criminally vulgar. And that lyric, I mean, it really just kind of laid out a lot of the teenage anxieties and anxious kind of thoughts and things about self-loathing that lots of people have when they're younger, and some people still have to this day. The idea that, especially if you are in some way shy, gawky, clumsy, is that the idea of going, well, I have to go to a place and I have to talk to somebody and I have to improvise and I have to make a fool of myself. And of course, I'm not going to be attractive to everyone, so I have to talk to some people, and I have to be rejected. Though, and the odds are always going to be that I'm going to be rejected by somebody. And of course, I remember a couple of times when I met somebody, and I thought, oh, I'm quite nice actually, and I started to, taking basically my heart going boom, 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 boom in my mouth, and me talking to somebody and kind of like extending the idea subtly, but not that subtly, that you're quite nice. I'd quite like to, kiss you and hold your hand and go out with you and all that type of stuff. And knowing that, especially if it was a Friday or a Saturday night, that you only got a certain number of chances to do that. If I was quite picky, to be honest, as well, there were not many people that I was attracted to, and I'm still not. The idea of talking to somebody and extending the idea that I could quite like them, and then, well, you don't know if they're single or not. You don't know if they're single, if you're their type or not, and you don't know if it's going to work, and you don't know if they're gay or not, and all these type of things that are in play. And you kind of sit there and you kind of, and this was obviously before Tinder and all that stuff. So you couldn't just swipe left or right or whatever. You actually just had to see somebody and talk to somebody, and there were only a certain number of opportunities that you had. There were only a certain number of Friday and Saturday nights, and there was only a certain amount of money. You couldn't go out every Friday and Saturday night. You couldn't go and talk to everybody, and you couldn't, especially if it was like you went to Eddie's or somewhere and they were playing the fucking Red Hot Chili Peppers, and you were kind of going, well, there's only so many times I can talk to somebody to find out. And then there were some people and you just thought, no, I just don't stand a chance. That person is like, up there, and I'm like this gawky, spotty 16-year-old kid in a Smith t-shirt, and I'm down here, and she wouldn't be interested in me because there are those guys that are older and have got jobs and they work in the car factory, and there's that part of it as well. So the How Soon Is Now is probably the song that for me kind of approaches and articulates the terror of being single in a way that very, very few songs actually otherwise do. There's that second verse, which is, how can you say I go about things the wrong way? I'm human and I need to be loved just like everybody else does. And then there's that idea of well, if you say I'm going about things the wrong way, the implication there is I'm talking to somebody to find out whether, maybe, perhaps, possibly, could I, are you in the market to be not single with me? And they go, no, you're going about this the wrong way. And then all of a sudden it's like you take all of your hopes and your ambitions, you put them out there, and then somebody just explodes them. I remember the most brutal rejection I ever had. I almost wanted to go to the person in question and go, that was incredible. The brutality with which you did that. You should be representing Britain in the Olympics for the casual dismissiveness that you have around this. But, by that point, you'd already walked into the different room and was probably dancing to Shed 7 or something. So, them's the breaks. That's how it goes. But no, How Soon Is Now is obviously it also clearly articulates that line. There's a club, if you'd like to go, you could meet somebody who really loves you, but you go and you stand on your own and you leave on your own home and you go home and you cry and you want to die. My word, again, if you put Smith's lyrics into an AI bot to create the perfect Smith's lyric, that probably would be part of it. But How Soon Is Now, it's not just an incredible lyric that articulates, the terror of singledom and teenagedom in a way that very few songs actually do. Certainly, an anthem for a generation that realised that This Sex Is On Fire is the stupidest song ever recorded, unless it's by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. But one of those songs that you just kind of go, I thought I was the only person that felt like that. And great art does that. It illuminates and it expands and it shows you a new angle on a reality that you already lived. And suddenly there was an element, there's a comfort in that of going, it's not just me, is it? I'm not the only person that feels like this. There are other bands, there are other people in the world. Yes, one of them is Morrissey, but there are other people that experience and feel and see the same things that I do. It's one of the best songs of all time. And then it's followed up by Handsome Devil, which is pretty unambiguous. It's certainly far more vulgar, because it goes, all the streets are crammed with things eager to be held, and I know what hands are for, and I'd like to help myself. Handsome Devil is a horn fest, isn't it? It really is. It's pretty much a song that there are a few songs that really articulate the idea of being just chock full of hormones as a 16-year-old, with your virginity as an unexploded bomb that you wanted to get rid of. If you remember the video game, I think it was Bomb Jack, where there were two characters and there was a bomb, and if you touched the other character, it was like tag, and it counted down to 0 and it exploded, and the person that was holding the bomb at the time went down to 0, died. But that's why I guess sometimes if you were single and before you had any experience of relationships, that's what it might have felt like. Is the idea being is that my sex drive is an unexploded bomb, and I really want to, I need to get beyond that hurdle, because after that then other things in my life will start to happen. I mean, certainly that's how I felt as a 16-year-old. Obviously I've changed now, I'm older now, I'm a clever swine and I'm slightly more cynical, but Handsome Devil is a song that really feels like if you could carve a song just purely out of unrequited lust, it probably would have been Handsome Devil, which, by the way, Handsome Devil wasn't on the LP. The Peel Session version is on here. I don't think an official studio recording of Handsome Devil, apart from the Peel Session, has been released, actually. Although I know one exists, because there's some on the Troy Tate demos before they reconfigured the LP. But this is the first LP release for that particular track. And then, of course, we've got Hand in Glove as the penultimate track on side 1. This is the 7-inch mix, not the version that was remixed by John Porter for the LP. And it's a banger. It really is. It's one of the finest debut singles of all time. Last track, side 1, track 8 already, Still Ill. And this is the Peel Session from September 1983 of Still Ill, which was released as a single in Germany on 12-inch. I did look it up. It's about £40 to get a copy. I haven't got one. I'm not going to get one either. So you flip over to side 2. There you go. And I don't even know why I'm showing you that. In fact, what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you the Greek version of the LP for side 2. Now, the Greek version of the LP for side 2, this is not a gatefold, and this comes in a slightly different inner sleeve. So this inner sleeve is blue and not white. I know, train spotter scum. Hey, how dare you? This is, so you've got Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now. And of course, this is the version that's the single, not the 12-inch mix or anything like that. Track 2 then is This Night Has Opened My Eyes. One of the very few Smith songs that a studio recording of the song hasn't been issued, alongside, I think, Handsome Devil. This Night Has Opened My Eyes was, I think, recorded in the studio in July 1984, alongside versions of Rush Home Ruffians, Nowhere Fast, as potential B-sides for the single Oh William It Was Really Nothing, and then the subsequent single, which I hadn't yet chosen. At that session in July 1984, Rush Home Ruffians was about 7 minutes long, I believe, and Nowhere Fast was also recorded, both of which were then moved on to the Smiths' second LP proper, which is the next Smiths episode that I do after this one. But what we did have is those 3 unreleased studio recordings, but we also have the radio session version for the Peel Session in September 1983 of This Night Has Opened My Eyes. And again, that's a song that details, I think, the reality that a lot of people were living in a way in which a lot of songs didn't necessarily fully articulate, or you didn't really fully grasp or understand. So there's the lyric around, the dream is gone, but the baby is real. And and you did a good thing. She could have been a poet, she could have been a fool, you did a bad thing. You know, that idea of, and again, when we're talking about the flip side of William, it was really nothing, the traditional concepts of marriage that existed. And This Night Has Opened My Eyes is a song about consequence. It's about reaction to action. And it's a song that was like, you know, for example, when I was talking about those oafish lads who had the cars and the money and the girlfriends and all that type of stuff, is that they became parents, and sometimes that's what they wanted, you know. Sometimes they wanted to be loved by something that just blindly loved them, and that's okay. That's a completely valid way of thinking, but it's not necessarily the one where you suddenly realise when you get to the age of 43 and you've got, you know, 3 children, and you kind of go, right, so that's where I am, you know. And my oldest is like 20 or 25 or something, you know, and has left home. It's not for everybody, that path. It wasn't for me. And there's an element of judgmentalism. The lyric is quite judgmental. It's looking down, not across, on people and their life choices, as if to go, how dare you go and pick that? You become old before you were young, you know, etc., etc. It's an unsympathetic lyric, I think it's fair to say, and it's not my favourite Smith song by any stretch of the imagination. And neither is the next song on the LP, You've Got Everything Now, which again, as I talked about, was around Morrissey looking at people that he had been at school with, who'd left school, and the life and plans that they had had, and the paths that they had taken, the material things that they've achieved through jobs and cars and money and partners and children and everything that went with it, and looking at that and going, you know, you've got everything now, and what a terrible mess I've made of my life. But that's, again, if you judge yourself by other people, you end up being a failure by other people's standards, and you should really only judge your own life by who you are and what you want to achieve with your life and what you want to do with it. There is then Accept Yourself, track 3, side 2, which is the Kid Jensen session from 1983. Again, this is, I think, a song which in a studio form only appears on Louder Than Bombs, but we do have Girl Afraid, and Girl Afraid was on the 12-inch to Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now. This is the same version that's on the 12-inch of Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now. And Girl Afraid is again recorded at the Fallout Shelter, and it is a song about love and dependency and fear, and kind of talking again from a female perspective around where do his intentions lay, does he even have any, you know, that insecurity that addresses how people kind of look at themselves and the things that go through their mind, and what happens at the start of a relationship. And yeah, so there's that lyric about boy afraid, prudence never pays, and everything she wants costs money. And of course that idea of money is a key thing that's in William. It was really nothing. How can you stay with a fat girl who say, would you like to marry me, and if you like you can buy the ring? She doesn't care about anything. Again, all these lyrics are kind of built around the central tenements of, you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the concept of going, well, relationships, money, job, career, home, food, self-realization, self-image, actualization, all those things are all part of one great big miasma of anxieties. And but I think the Smiths are probably one of the most anxious bands in the world, apart from the Smashing Pumpkins, actually, in that respect. But that's what all these lyrics are kind of addressing. We have Back to the Old House as the next track. I think, let's think track 6, side 2, Back to the Old House. This is the Peel session version from September 1983. The studio version was not on an album until Louder Than Bombs. So Back to the Old House was one of the B-sides. I think of What Difference Does It Make? And it's a gorgeous, lovely acoustic song that I think it's really been overlooked in the Smith catalogue, actually. There's only, 67 Smith songs or something like that. And somehow Back to the Old House is one that always gets overlooked, and it's as good as anything else the band released. It really, really is. We also have Reel Around the Fountain, and Reel Around the Fountain is from the Peel session from May 1983, not from the version from September 1983 that wasn't broadcast until 1985. It was also released on this EP, Smith's Peel Sessions, which you'll have seen in a previous episode. This features the first Smith's Peel session, which, if I recall correctly, is from 18th of May 1983, and that features What Difference Does It Make, Miserable Lie, Reel Around the Fountain, and Handsome Devil. And that one of these songs, Miserable Lie, I believe, is not on the Hatful of Hollow, so that's the only place where you can get it still to this day. I do wonder when there's going to be a more comprehensive Smiths box set, because there's a lot of stuff just floating out there that exists that could be released. And then the last track, Please, 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 Let Me Get What I Want, which was described by Morrissey as very close to being the perfect Smith song. And very, very close to being the perfect Smith song is most definitely where it is. It's 1 minute, 50 seconds. It's over in the blink of an eye. It doesn't outstay its welcome. It says everything it needs to say in one go, and it's there, and it's been, and it's gone. And then, of course, you have That Is Hatful of Hollow alongside the singles. We did have another single release, this time promoting the B-side of William, It Was Really Nothing. That song that I've already mentioned, one of the Smiths' best songs, is How Soon Is Now. Here is the 7-inch that's backed with one of the very few Smith songs that was never played live by the Smiths, which is Well I Wonder. And Well I Wonder appears on the next Smiths studio release, Meat is Murder. This is a dinked jukebox copy, which I think I paid about 69p for, and was released in January 1985. The still here is taken from a 1948 film called Dunkirk, although there is surely no coincidence that the hairstyle there is not dissimilar to Morris's hairstyle at all. And then we had the 12-inch version here of How Soon Is Now. This is also backed with a new and exclusive track called Oscillate Wildly, taking its cue from Oscar Wilde. And that is one of the, again, a fantastic 12-inch. This is the full 6 minutes 43. I think the 7-inch there has a 3-minute edit. This version comes from Beer Davis in Moseley, Birmingham, with his phone number on the back, which I will not share with you. Although that name rings a bell, actually. I don't know why I know Beer Davis. He might have been a DJ at one of the clubs that I went to when I was 16, pretending to be 18. And Oscillate Wildly is one of the fabulous instrumental Smith tracks, never played live, although oddly enough, Badly Drawn Boy has played Oscillate Wildly live, and I've seen him play it when I saw Badly Drawn Boy in Chicago, which was a strange position to be in. And clearly Oscillate Wildly also takes its name from Oscar Wilde. In America, How Soon Is Now got a specially priced 3-track 12-inch single. Here it is, this time featuring the cover art from the gatefold of Hatful of Hollow. It features the long version of How Soon Is Now on the A side. There it is. And on the B side it features Girl Afraid and How Soon Is Now, an edit. So this, by the way, because the album wasn't released, Hatful of Hollow, in the US, this might have been the first release for Girl Afraid in the US. And again, this photograph taken at the Glastonbury Festival in 1984, in the days when Glastonbury was affordable and you could actually go. And I think that's pretty much it for Hatful of Hollow. It's quite an exciting period, actually. Lots of people's favourite, I think it's fair to say, of the Smiths releases. And obviously we had the 3 singles. We had William, It Was Really Nothing, William, It Was Really Nothing, and we had, oh God, I'll put the other one down somewhere, Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now, of course. And we had the album itself. So this is going to be the bit where I'm going to get all the singles and I'm going to go and put them in a nice little assortment here. Hopefully would make a good thumbnail image for my introductory page there. So this will be the bit where normally I do a separate video where I do these and I hold these things up like this, and then I but no, this is going to be the Smiths Hatful of Hollow. This hopefully will be the cover image that you will see on the page on the YouTubes. So there it is, the Smiths Hatful of Hollow, the second album, or more correctly, Smiths 1.5, a revision of the debut album, a B-sides compilation, and probably the best £3.99 most people will have spent for quite some time. It was an album that when I first heard it, which was about 1987, I had this sudden realisation of why and how and where was this band all my life, and I suddenly felt less alone than I think I'd felt in a long time, because suddenly it felt like Morrissey really understood the life that I had lived and the anxieties and the fears that I had in a way that very few other acts at that point really did. It was only really Suede in 1993 that, for me, really articulated, I think, the terrors and the anxieties of being a younger person in a way that really connected to me then and still connects to me now. And I think if I had to pick between Suede and the Smiths, no competition, it's going to be Suede. And I know many of you would probably agree with me, but it's a big world. We all like the same stuff, and it would be boring if we were all the same. So if you don't like the Smiths, that's absolutely great. Don't listen to them, because there's plenty of other things that you can listen to in the meantime. So stay beautiful, take care of each other. I don't know who you are, so I can't say I love you lots, but I appreciate if you've watched these videos, spending the time with me whilst I talk about a record that has no small meaning to me. And stay beautiful. I'll see you all later. Okay, bye. And now this is the bit where I switch it off. Good night, and thank you.